A small town in Texas completely shattered after an attack we're now learning could have been prevented. 26 lives lost in a shooting at a church full of worshippers, among them 8 members from a single family, spanning 3 generations, including a pregnant mother and her 3 children. The youngest victim, 17 months old. Well, we're learning new details about the gunman behind that massacre. 26-year-old Dianne Gallagher had a history of violence and an obsession over a family grudge. While in the Air Force, he spent a year in a military jail for assaulting his wife and stepson. That should have excluded him from being able to purchase a firearm. Well, for the latest on the investigation, how the shooter was legally able to obtain not just 1 gun, but at least 4 guns. Dianne Gallagher joins us from Sutherland Springs. Diana, no doubt a lot of anger right now over why the US Air Force failed to report this killer's violent past.
Yeah, and Lynda, to be honest, we don't have an answer to that. All we know is that the Air Force did not convey that information about those domestic violence, the charges, that conviction there to the FBI database. So once he received that bad conduct discharge to let the civilian world know about his previous conviction there underneath the military court system, they have asked for the Air Force Inspector General to investigate, to figure out where the disconnect was there. Was it a clerical error? Did somebody just not do their job? So they're still trying to figure that out. But as you point out, Lynda, he was able to get not 1, but 4 guns since he left the Air Force. And so this is something that he walked into stores and purchased them. It doesn't appear, at least the one that he got, that he used in the shooting at the church behind me, that Ruger AR-556. He purchased that at a store, passed the background check. They found no sort of disqualifying information, and that is because the Air Force neglected to pass on that information.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. And President Trump, of course, was asked about whether extreme vetting would help, given that he's spoken so much about extreme vetting for foreigners coming into the US. But he says that wouldn't have changed it at all.
Yeah, so Lynda, the president has sort of said at this point he doesn't think it's a gun issue. He doesn't think it's a gun thing. He thinks that it's a mental health thing. Now, I want to indicate that we have no sort of information right now on this shooter's mental health background. So this president is the one who stated that there. But he also is employing sort of the idea that the only thing that can stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. And there are a lot of people here in Texas who are pointing to a resident here, a passerby, who did pull out his own weapon, Lynda, as that shooter exited the church and began shooting at him. According to authorities, that man actually did hit the shooter once in the arm area and once in the torso. Eventually, the shooter ended up killing himself. He shot himself in the head, we are told. But a lot of them are using that as the example. And the president says, in his opinion and his feelings, that if perhaps they had strengthened any sort of vetting process, maybe that, in his words, good guy with a gun wouldn't have been able to get his gun either. Now, there are a lot of people who obviously disagree with that sentiment. Here in Sutherland Springs, Lynda, for the most part, people are just kind of trying to wrap their minds around the fact that at least 4% of their population was wiped out in a shooting on a Sunday morning in the middle of church services. So at this point, we're not seeing a whole lot of gun debate in Sutherland Springs. Eventually, though, it is going to come to this town because of so many people talking about it.
And interesting to note, while you might not be hearing about the gun debate there, across Texas, a lot of people explaining that they share the president's sentiment that more people should be armed.
Very much so. In fact, even a lawmaker here in Texas initially afterward, just a few hours after the shooting, sort of said this is just a call for more people to make sure they arm themselves personally so we can prevent something like this happening. As we start to look back at what led up to this shooting, we put together those retrospective pieces. In addition to his violent past, we're also hearing from neighbors, Lynda, who noted that you hear a lot of gunshots, people doing target practice in Texas, but they say that it was a bit disturbing, that they had noticed this guy, Dianne Gallagher, doing even more target practice, that he was increasingly out in his yard shooting in the days and weeks leading up to this, so much so that they took note of it. And they mentioned, yeah, it happens in Texas a lot, but it was so increased that we paid attention to it. It was a bit troublesome even to us. So it's something that is ubiquitous here in this state and in much of the United States, but it's not something that people here haven't noticed, at least.
Dianne Gallagher, good to have you there for us on this story. Thank you very much. Well, Sutherland Springs, where Dianne is home to hundreds of people, all mourning the 26 victims, all killed while attending church. Now, the victims are always the most important people after an attack like this, of course, never the murderer. Randy Kay has a look at the lives lost that Sunday morning.
In an instant, about 4% of the residents of Sutherland Springs, Texas, were taken. The youngest victim, about a year and a half old. The oldest killed, 77. Among the dead, Annabelle Pomeroy. The 14-year-old was the daughter of the church's pastor, who often spoke about her at church, once sharing this story about them riding his motorcycle together.
Annabelle's been wanting to ride with me and go with me here and there. And the bike was showing 34 degrees this morning, and she was a trooper. She did not complain. She sat back there behind me and rode.
The pastor and his wife were out of town Sunday, but Annabelle went to church anyway without them.
One thing that gives me a sliver of encouragement is the fact that Belle was surrounded yesterday by her church family that she loved fiercely.
At just 16, Haley Kruger had big plans for her life before it was cut short. Her mother told CNN Haley was a vibrant 16-year-old that loved life, adding she was also looking forward to her future as a nurse in the NICU. She loved babies and always wanted to help.
She was amazing, and we're going to miss her.
The church's visiting pastor, Brian Holcomb, was also killed. So was his wife, Carla Holcomb. In all, they lost 8 members of their family. 3 generations wiped out that terrible morning. The Holcombs lived on a nearby farm in Floresville, Texas, with several of their children. Their son Danny died Sunday, and so did his daughter Noah. She was the youngest victim at just 17 months old. The couple's son John was also shot and remains in the hospital. His wife Crystal Holcomb was killed. She was 2 months pregnant. 3 of her 5 children were also killed. The other 2 were shot and are at the hospital with John, their stepfather. Also among the victims, Tara McNulty, a close family friend of the Holcombs, and the gunman's own grandmother-in-law, Lula White. She was his wife's grandmother, and friends say she volunteered frequently at the church. Her niece, Amy Bacchus, wrote this on her Facebook page shortly after White's death. "I have no doubt where she is right now. She is in heaven, laying her crowns and jewels at the feet of Jesus and celebrating. I love and will miss you." So many lives taken by a man who likely knew most everyone in the church community where he opened fire. Randy Kay, CNN, New York.
Well, just before we move on, we want to highlight a man who's being called a hero. Stephen Williford chased down and shot the gunman, wounding him after he fled the church, possibly saving more lives. Stephen spoke with CNN affiliate KHBS. Take a listen.
He saw me, and I saw him, and I was standing behind a pickup truck for cover, and we exchanged. I'm like, it was surreal to me. It couldn't be happening. I could not believe it. And we exchanged gunfire, and I know I hit him. I don't know where I hit him, but I know I hit him. And he got into his vehicle, and he fired another couple of rounds through his side window. And I fired, when the window dropped, I fired another round at him again. And one as he was pulling away, and he turned down 539, Farm to Market Road 539, and sped away.
A horrific tragedy. Let's just take a breather. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.